Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. I'm your host, Mike Hingson, and today we have Tessa Lynne Alburn, Tessa for short, and we're really glad you're here. Tessa is in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. We are a little jealous, not too, because I don't mind being in Victorville, although it's still not on the water or anything like that, like other places get to be. But nevertheless, we cope with what we have. So, Tessa, really glad that you're here on Unstoppable Mindset with us today.
I'm really glad to be here, Michael. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us in your home and with you. And I'm going to have to learn all about this idea that you describe yourself as a feminine energy coach and other things. We'll get to that. But why don't you start by telling us a little bit about the earlier Tessa and where you came from, what you did, and all your deep, dark secrets that you think we ought to know and we won't tell the law.
Yes, I might have to filter a few, but
where's the fun in that?
Basically, the early days, I would say, I was, most people wouldn't guess this knowing me now, but I was very shy and introverted, and I was in a dysfunctional home where my dad chose to work night shifts and things like that, or in other states whenever possible. So he was, just unavailable or had escaped us in some way. And my mother had some emotional issues, and she would be what I would call a rageaholic from time to time. She had a number of borderline attributes. And so growing up, I was very scared and doing that thing that they call walking on eggshells, right? Like, when is the volcano going to explode? That sort of thing. We'll get ready to run. You just didn't quite know what was going to happen.
That's no fun.
Did okay. Yeah, I did okay in school because I was able to focus all my attention there and then keep myself safe by being as smart as I could be and as perfect as I could be and be a good girl. So that's how I coped with it.
Did you have siblings?
I had one younger sibling, 3 years younger than I was. And at first it started out great. I was sort of like helping to take care of her and nurturing her. And then pretty soon it became a competitive thing. So we had a rough patch from 1 to when I was almost 20 years old. And she had gone overseas with a Rotary Exchange program. And when she came back, it was like talking with a different person entirely. It was so great. Yeah. Because she'd been out of the household, number one, and lived with a really loving family. And she'd been exposed to an entirely different culture. She lived in Sweden for a year.
Oh.
And so she gathered this worldly sense about her. And when she came back, she was like, oh, I kind of get you now, like we can be compatible. And so we kissed and made up.
Wow. So you guys get along well still?
We do. She's a dear person, and we live many miles away from one another. She has 2 amazing kids and a wonderful husband, and she's got his whole family over there. And so everybody's very supportive and loving.
Where do they live?
They're in Maryland.
Yeah, that's Eastern Colorado, right?
Not Colorado, Maryland.
I know what I said.
Maryland. Yes, that Maryland is definitely east of Colorado.
Maryland is just Eastern Colorado, just like California's Western Colorado, right?
Exactly. She's on a little place called the Magathie River. And so she gets to be near water, and it's quite lovely over there.
So do you have husband, children, or any of those kinds of things?
I do not. I am happily single.
Someone has to keep the trend, right?
Yes, although I do entertain the idea of a relationship now.
Someday. Yeah, well, see how that goes.
When it's right. But I just have so many things on my plate, like in terms of why I'm here. I feel like, my sole purpose and my sole mission is actually the number one thing in my life. So I'm happy about that.
My wife and I got married in our early 30s, and we just hadn't found the right persons for each other, and we didn't know each other. We met in January of 1982, and we were married in November of 1982, but we immediately hit it off, and we knew that we found soulmates and the right people. And so it clearly was sort of the right choice because we lived together until she passed away last November. So we were married 40 years. And, but you're right. It's got to be the right person, and you got to know that, and you'll know it when it happens, if it happens.
Exactly. And I feel like, spirit will definitely knock me on the shoulders, tap me on the shoulders if and when that person comes in, right?
Yeah. So you, where are you from originally?
Originally, I am from the state of Florida, the Sunshine State.
Yeah. The humidity state.
Yes, that's a little more accurate, isn't it?
I'm a fan of the old folk group, the Kingston Trio, and they have a song called The Everglades. And one of the lines is, if the gators don't get you, then the skeeters will.
Oh my goodness, that's hysterical. I don't remember that song, but I do remember the Kingston Trio. And yes, it is true. The gators, or maybe the snakes.
Well, there's that too. The snakes as well. Yeah, the gators, snakes, and skeeters. They're all there. That's true. So, did you go to school and stay in Florida, or how long were you guys there?
I did not. My dad worked for McDonnell Douglas, and so we had this lifestyle of moving around to different missile sites and things, and always coming back for a number of years, coming back to the Cape Canaveral area. And so my last year of school, I went to junior high in Florida and in Mississippi, came back to Florida, went to high school for a year, then went up to New York State for a year, and then to Pennsylvania for a year. So my high school and junior high was just a real journey in adaptability.
What was that like?
It was intense.
Yeah.
I think one of the fun things that I remember is when I was younger in Florida, I had a best friend that was from Georgia. So I had a real Southern drawl, just kind of like her. And when I moved up to New York State, I was definitely kind of a standout person. People didn't know what to think of me. Maybe they thought I was dumb at first, but they figured out I wasn't. And I learned to drop that accent most of the time. You don't hear it from me, but I do think of that kind of fondly because some of my teachers were like, "Oh, that's special. Let's hear that y'all,
and all y'all." And
yes. So the moving was a kind of an intensity in our family.
Yeah. That must have been fun. Do you have any analysis of how that affected you?
Yes.
It made you a gypsy.
Yes. Well, now I'm a nomadic gypsy, a digital nomad, a bohemian gypsy, whatever you want to call it. And at first I was resisting that urge to wander and be in different places. And then I realized I had the skills. So along with the heartache of being torn away from friends with no time to have closure or transition, constantly in my youth, suddenly coming home and be like, pack up your room, we're moving next week. Oh, gosh. And, coming home from like summer camp. And it's just shocking, right? Yeah. Especially at that age where one is developing the hormones for boys and like relationships with older boys in the high school and that sort of thing. And I was just kind of getting a first year of popularity, and then boom, we're gone again. And then I'm nobody. So it was like popular to no one, or no one to popular, or now I got to work my way back up. And then I've got to hang out with the cool kids, and I got to hang out in the girls' room and smoke cigarettes to fit in, or skip school and play hooky and be bad, So there were a lot of influences that happened as a result of moving. And I think the one thing that it did help with at home was it kept me kind of out of my mom's hair. So there was, I was able to feel a little more powerful when I started to rebel, but there was definitely a big rebellion that happened. And it was totally necessary for me to start to feel safe and like I had any kind of purchase in this life.
Did you have any real major traumatic kinds of things that happened to you as a child, as so many kids do? Yes.
And so many do. I think most of the time we don't know that about the people all around us.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to hear those things. But yes, I had a number of things, but I'll say the main one of the big ones that I didn't realize how it was impacting me till much later in life was a near drowning event. Ooh. And that was in Florida. And as you might well imagine, it was very swampy, dark water, grassy with alligators in it and snapping turtles and, creepy, weird fish called mud puppies and things you just don't want to come in contact with. And I was sweeping the dock off. We used to go visit friends of ours who had this little cabin out in this underdeveloped area off of Little Lake Harris. It's probably super developed now, but back then it wasn't. And you took your boat and you went along the canals to go to the little fishing tackle store and get your milk. And that was it. You brought everything else with you. And there were just fields and fields of tall grasses, probably filled with all kinds of critters. And the dock was just kind of basic. It didn't have a railing or anything. We used to just have the little skiff and we would go out fly fishing and things like that. And I was about 9 years old then. And we went there in wintertime. So I had on all these sweaters, this big, I'll never forget it. I had this one huge hand knitted sweater that was probably a half-inch thick, just because of all the yarn that it was used to make it. I was wearing that and sweeping off the dock, and I got vertigo because I didn't realize at the time that I had a vertigo problem. And so I was sweeping, and then my head just spun, and I just tipped over and fell in. And I was a good swimmer, so nobody had ever thought of, well, we have to keep the kids in life jackets or anything like that, because we were all really comfortable in the water. But when I hit the water, it was very, very cold. And I just dissociated. I'm pretty sure that would be a psychological term that happened, where I had a consciousness that was like, oh, I have to get out of here. But I was so cold, it felt like I could barely move. And then all the weight of the winter clothing on me was just dragging me down. And it was dragging me down to the bottom of the canal. And they're built deep, they're like, I don't know, 12 to 15 feet deep, those canals. That's a lot for a little kid. And the only thing that kept me coming up that I felt like was really driving me on was the terror of the icky things down there. Right?
I don't want to get to the bottom of that canal.
Yeah, exactly. Like the muck, no. And I would I felt like I was pushing up. I don't know if I really reached the bottom and I was not fully conscious, but I felt like I was just struggling to get to the top. And then I'd get this little gasp of air, and then I'd sink more, and then I'd do the same thing over and over. And I could feel every now and then I could feel the underneath of the top of the dock, but there was nothing to hold on to.
Yeah.
And I just kept going under. Fortunately, a couple of angels were there. And one of them was my little play friend, who was a couple years younger than me. And he saw that I was in the water and he went into shock. And so he was like, Dad, my name was Terry at the time. Terry's in the water. Terry fell in. He's like whispering it. But fortunately, his dad was up on a ladder about 30 feet away. And he finally got mad and he's like, what the He was old salt, Donald.
Yeah.
And he saw me splashing, I guess. And he just leapt off that ladder and came down and yanked me out. And I was safe. Yeah. Although extremely stunned for at least 24 hours.
Yeah. What do you think you learned from that?
Oh my gosh.
As you developed, if you were to put a positive thing on it, I mean, it was certainly traumatic, and we could talk about that a lot, I'm sure, but what positive did you learn from that, do you think?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, a practical thing is we all need love, and comfort. And one of the things I didn't get at the time was that. And so later in my life, I realized I was having kind of like this dread that the creepy things were going to get me and that I was going to suffocate. And I needed to heal that. So I learned that one can heal that. And I think that's been really powerful for me, because growing up the way that I did, I had felt like a victim most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when I realized I could do something about it, I could actually heal the psychological scars and take action and get, even if it was however many years, 30 plus years later, I could still get the healing that I needed and resolve that in myself so that the psychological impact didn't have to keep moving forward with me from then on.
How did you figure that out?
Well, the hard way. Because I kind of hit rock bottom. What happened was I went traveling, and I went to Costa Rica, and I was without enough friends for too long when I was there. And I remember I was asked to kind of look after this person's hostel while they went on vacation. And when they were gone, I was just so sad. And I felt like I was going to die. And I was like, what is going on with me? I'm in beautiful Costa Rica. There's snorkeling here. It's like everything I wanted for this idea of this trip that I had taken. And then suddenly I was depressed. And then I had this connection in my mind. I just kind of saw this connection that somehow the fear of death when I was underwater was connected to my thought that I was going to die or that I needed to die. And I was like, that is no good, right?
And you hadn't let go.
I did.
Yeah.
I hadn't been able to resolve the psychological trauma and the emotional trauma or the physical. And so I went about healing in a variety of ways. And I'll tell you, one of the ones that cinched it for me, I did a number of things and they were all good and they all helped. But the thing that finally cleared it was something called RET, rapid eye therapy. And it's kind of like EMDR. So there's a stimulus to your eyes as you recall certain parts of the story. And then basically you retell the story to yourself in a way that's empowering, that gives another meaning to the event. And the power from in then comes in and kind of clears your cells and clears your memory and gives you a second memory. And it's can be a beautiful process. So I'm really, really grateful to all the practitioners who helped me over the years. And that was a big, big turning point for me. And it also gave me the ability to hold that space for others when they're going through something really deep and dark.
Yeah, I gather you didn't get a lot of support from your parents after you fell in the water.
Correct.
Yeah. Which is so unfortunate.
Yes. It was unfortunate, but, they really did do the best that they could. It just wasn't what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's great that you are able to recognize that now. And it sounds like you're not angry at them because they were who they were. And there's nothing we can do about other people like that. I mean, like that, not people like that, but rather people who have those characteristics and traits, or any characteristics and traits. We all make our own choices.
Absolutely. Part of me wants to laugh when you say, like, you never, I don't have to get mad at them, right? Because occasionally I do still, but not for that.
Yeah, but not for that. But yeah, but you're able to deal with things and move on. I understand.
Absolutely, right? Like accepting them that given who they were and the lives they had, and of course I learned more and more about them as I grew up, I came to understand that they literally just didn't have the capacity. It wasn't that they didn't want to help me.
Yeah.
They just short-circuited. They didn't know what to do for me.
That. Yeah. exactly.
Yeah. So they yelled at me, get in bed. That was it. And never
Yeah.
talk about it again.
And dry off.
Exactly.
Or dry up. But anyway, either way. Well, so did you? Yeah, well, anyway, so did you go off to college after high school?
I did.
Where did you go do that?
I was able to go to a music university in the state of Pennsylvania, where I studied flute and voice. And I was a big fish in a little pond.
Wow, there you go. I read, have you ever read the book? It's called David and Goliath. It's written by the gentleman who wrote The Tipping Point. And Gladstone. And one of the things he talks about in there are people who make the wrong choices of going to college. They think it's important to go to Harvard and all that. And when they get there, they discover or any of the big schools, they discover there are very little fish in a very huge pond. Whereas if they would go to other schools, and he gave some examples of people who did that, although it wasn't necessarily their intent, they ended up being pretty big fish in much littler ponds and got a much better education and college experience as a result.
I have no doubt that that's true for many, many people. Of course, there's going to be the stars, the people who rise to the surface right away and get the attention and all the support that they need in those big schools. But in a smaller school, you can carve your way through like a little more stylized for yourself or customized or get the attention that you need in certain areas. And I was able to do that in certain ways. I had the complete attention of my flute teacher, who really taught me amazing things about playing the flute. And I had the opportunity to solo a lot in all the ensembles and choirs and all of that. So it gave me a lot of grounding in actual performance and musicianship.
Do you still play the flute?
Only on occasion, but I do still sing now and then. Go. Yes, my style has now shifted to kind of a sound healing style. So I do use it sometimes with clients. And what I would call, I don't know if you're familiar with this, sometimes I receive kind of like a channeling of light language. Mm-hmm. And so the words don't necessarily make any sense, but the tones and the sounds that come through are very healing for the people that they come through for.
I occasionally do karaoke. That's as close as I get.
Oh, there
these
you
days.
go. That's pretty healing.
I do a mean Mac the Knife. What can I say?
Oh, the shark.
Yeah. And a few others like that. But
Three Penny Opera. Wonderful.
There you go. But it's fun, and it's intended to be fun. I've also heard at a few karaoke places people who really do need to keep their day jobs, but that's okay.
I would tell you, I'm terrible at karaoke. I don't know what happens. I start to freeze up. It's so strange. I guess I'm so used to being a performer that it's hard for me to just like do something spontaneous and have to be relying on the words and the weird sound that's coming through the speakers in a bar, with funny echoes and all of that. But that's cool that you do it.
Of course, for me, I need to know the words in advance. So I practice before I go, because I'm not going to read the screen. So I do pretty well with it. It's fun.
So do you pick your songs ahead of time and then tell the DJ what you want?
Yeah, they usually give people a choice of, or at least in the places I've been to, I can choose what I want to sing. So I'll tell them in advance, which works out well. Otherwise, what I have never tried is standing up with a song that I don't really know and having somebody whispering the words to me. And that might work, but we'd have to really work out the timing of doing it. So it's an experiment worth trying sometime.
Yes, that could be interesting. I could sort of see you with an earpiece, right? And they're like you're like a covert spy. Yeah. And they're whispering in your ear, say it like this, sing it like this.
Yeah. Or at least tell me the words,
Yes.
And I do a good version of 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford. But the problem with me doing 16 Tons is I cheat. I've also heard there's a duo, Homer and Jethro, who used to really do playoffs on country and Western stuff. And they did parodies of everything. So their chorus to 16 Tons goes, you load 16 tons. How do you feel? Too tired to work or too scared to steal? St. Peter, don't you call on me today because I'm a digging the other way. So I always have to put that in there somewhere.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's no sense not having fun with it.
Exactly. Well, fun is an essential part of life. Like, if we're not going to have fun, what's the point?
What good are we? Exactly. So what did you do after college?
After college,
You must have done something.
Oh, yes, of course. My first wander place was to go to New York City.
And what year was that?
That would have been 1980.
Okay, so you were well prior to the World Trade Center not being there. So yes, you saw the skyline. Did you see King Kong up on the building or any of those things?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. The days. It was, the full throttle, Big Apple, just everything booming. And it was pre-AIDS also.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that was starting to happen, but no, the word wasn't out yet.
Mm-mm.
And I was in the city when that hit big. It became a thing. And of course, there were a lot of people in my circle, a lot of men who were, very affected by that scare and worked through it in some way. And then there was kind of the new age awakening in the city. And I was so grateful. I got to go to Lincoln Center when Eric and Olga Butterworth were there.
Oh.
And what a speaker he is. And then she led the guided meditations.
Wow.
And it was just phenomenal. You would just sit in your chair and be transported. Suddenly the whole room was like filled with light, I thought. And, transported to some wonderful, loving place. It had a huge impact on me and my spiritual life. And then there was a singer. His name was Stephen something. I'm going to forget what his last name was. And he was a tenor and he was amazing. And so he would sing, every week he would do some solo that would just knock your socks off.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing like New York. And I think that is still true, although there's obviously been a lot of change, but there's nothing like New York.
Nothing like it. That's true.
We enjoyed going to Broadway, especially musicals. And of course, nothing like seeing a musical on Broadway. We saw
What's one of your favorites?
Well, Phantom of the Opera was clearly one of the ones that we loved. My wife and I went to see it 3 times. Chicago was another one. I saw The Music Man, I think, a couple times. That's one of my favorites of all times, movie or musical.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Yeah, we actually saw Rebecca Lugar as Marion it was before we moved out here, so it was in like 2000 or maybe early 2001. And I learned that she died from ALS in 2020. And I had seen her perform the year before just online somewhere, but that was pretty sad. Probably, though, one of my favorite all times is we got to see Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane in The Producers.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, that would have been fun.
It was better than the movie even, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. As I said, there's nothing like New York.
Nothing at all. And there's also nothing like your mom embarrassing you in the theater either. When she asks the star for their signature when you're stuck on an elevator with them. I was so embarrassed, but I give her credit.
Good for her, though. She had the courage to do it. That's okay.
Exactly.
And did she get the signature?
She did.
There you go. See, so what are you complaining about?
Exactly. I just remember like, oh, no, you're not supposed to do that because New Yorkers were all uptight,
Yeah.
And cool.
We went to see The Lion King, and my niece, our Karen's brother and his wife and our niece, who was 3 at the time, went with us to see The Lion King. And we got in because there was a friend of Gary's, Karen's brother, who knew some of the actors and got us tickets. And so we're in there as it started. And of course, the music and everything is wonderful. And then the hyenas came in, and what they do to make their entrance is they come in from the top of the theater, walking down the aisles, growling as they go by.
Mm.
And one of them got right up to Karen. Of course, Karen's sitting there in a wheelchair accessible seat or space in her wheelchair. This hyena comes right up to her and goes, "Whoa." You never saw a woman who is a paraplegic suddenly jump and almost hit the ceiling. It was amazing. But afterward, we got to go behind the scenes, and Alanya, our 3-year-old niece, just had, as Karen describes it, eyes as big as saucers with all the animals and everything during the play. And then we went behind the scenes and we got to meet Mustafa and some of the other people. And Karen even said they did such a good job on the design that you forget that those are people who are working those puppets.
Yes.
Which
Oh,
is
that's
amazing.
magical then when that happens.
Yeah, it was. So you went to New York and you had fun there, and you've wandered a bunch. You said you have a wanderlust spirit. And
I have. I left New York in the late 80s and came out west to California and spent 15 years in LA and Santa Monica, went up to Northern California. And somewhere in between all of that, I was also on tour in a band. And so I went to a bunch of different states and sang in Louisiana at the No Name Saloon and in Hobbs, New Mexico, all kinds of fun places, in Missouri. And we had an Elvis impersonator, and it was, the time of my life, enjoying that and just really getting to see a lot of different towns, meet a lot of different people. And eventually,
which you're not doing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just eventually winding up following more of a soul path than a talent path.
Okay. Because I was going to say, you're not doing the band as such today. So what do you do now?
Well, I am a feminine energy mastery coach for women. So I help them learn how to express their voices and their true selves in a feminine way so that they're heard and understood. So they don't have to over masculinize, to be heard or be the loudest voice in the room or the smartest voice in the room. They can just be themselves. So I help them with that. And I do what I would call soul coaching, which is helping people to understand more the messages of their soul and what their gifts are, their innate gifts, not necessarily their talents, although a talent could be connected to it.
Sure.
But it's like something that comes from deep within, like behind their heart. It's like the spark that creates all of them. And so I might help somebody, say, find their purpose or create greater abundance. But it's always going to be through that lens of the soul and the values, the high values that come with your soul.
Tell me, if you would, some examples of what that means. Some people maybe whose gifts you help them discover and what kind of gifts you found and so on.
Yeah,
I'm fascinated by it, and I absolutely respect what you do. Although, if I have to say so, not trying to be too bigoted, women, I find, are oftentimes a whole heck of a lot smarter than men anyway. My wife was always smarter than me, so you'll always find me being prejudiced that way. That just
goes to show that you are a very smart man for thinking that and saying it, especially.
She was always ahead of me on so many things. And I mean, there were times I was ahead, but it just was the way it was. And I respected that and loved it right from the outset. So it's one of the things that I miss and valued so much when she was here. There's so many examples of that. But anyway, so what are some examples of gifts and so on that you've helped people discover?
Well, people sometimes find themselves like in jobs where they're like, oh, I'm good at this thing. But then they start pushing at the edges of the job box and they find themselves maybe in an uncomfortable position because they have bigger ideas. They're like, this could happen with this and this could happen with that. And usually those are the kinds of people I work with because they do have a brilliance beyond what is recognized typically.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it causes ruffles. Like, say, for example, I had a client who was a consultant and was ruffling feathers because she was brilliant. And there was jealousy, and there's this and there's that. And then there's some people that just, they don't know how to handle it. And they're like, we don't know what to do with all your ideas. So we're just going to shut you down. Right. So that person eventually like either wears out or gets sick or just starts to think there's something really wrong with them. And maybe they start, escaping, going on a lot of vacations or drinking too much or eating bad foods or whatever it is. And if they come to me and we work together, what happens is they discover that they've got a bigger vision for humanity than what that particular role was allowing them to express, right? So they might learn that they're a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
They might suddenly realize that they're going to start a project, for some 501(c) that's going to change the world, create water for villages in Africa or whatever the idea is. But the problem was that they were just told that you don't fit in and you have to quiet down and etc. But when they really understand that it's coming from a much deeper, truer place, this propensity that they have to push against those boundaries, and instead of making themselves wrong, they realize and learn how to connect to the universe's calling, to the greater cosmic forces that are actually there to support them, then they become freed up to be themselves, to express themselves, to ask for what they need, to get the support, to get the financial support, whatever it is. And they become empowered.
Sometimes do you help them recognize that maybe rather than just trying to continue to say ideas because they're very enthusiastic about what they do, that strategically being a little bit more patient may be helpful, or does that enter into it?
Well, sometimes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So they usually go through phases. They'll go through a phase first where they've been super patient, not saying anything. They might not even believe their ideas are that great. And then they're like, wait a second, I see the solutions here. And then they try to speak up, but they don't know who to go to, and they don't understand how the corporation works. So that's where patience can pay off. But they also need to know that they're not just like in a waiting room somewhere. Right. Yeah. They need a plan. They need to know, yes, patience is important, but there are also moves they could be making that would fit, that would be acceptable. And to not give up when they're in the waiting room, but to keep going and taking steps toward their dream.
Maybe being a little bit more strategic about part of the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think men and women, I think women probably tend to express emotions more, and men think that they shouldn't, which is unfortunate. But I think people in general so often never learn how to be strategic in what they do.
That's true. I think so many of us, women in particular, do seem to have a bent towards perfectionism because that's what got them accepted, right, in the family system and then in schools or wherever. And we still see it today. Like if you watch some of these reality shows, you'll see that like a man will do a certain behavior, say a certain thing. A woman will do the exact same thing and get just like, you're a bitch, you're a witch, kind of big, right? Judgments. And so there's a way though we can present that and communicate, to connect with other people first, rather than just like showing up with all these big ideas. Because we have to know, are these people ready to hear it? Yeah.
And unfortunately, our society still says we're going to be much more ready to hear it from a man than a woman, even though oftentimes women are going to give the smarter and more in-depth idea. And it happens all too often. And it is unfortunate that women are so often shut down.
Yes. And they can do something about it. And it's not beating a drum, and it's not making other people wrong. It's finding a better way to communicate and a better way to connect first. to have one's ideas heard. And it may even involve presentational skills or leadership skills, right? That we don't necessarily learn. Nobody taught us. Right? We haven't been in that position before, and they're doing pretty well because they're figuring it out as they go. But sometimes we actually need those skills to take us to the next level so the idea can be heard.
Yeah. And it's a matter of learning how to make that process work. And, I know that there are any number of people with disabilities, blind and otherwise, who are in the same boat, that we may have very good ideas. Oh, but you're blind. How could you possibly know? And we see it way too often because
Absolutely,
we've got too many people who are just locked into stereotypes, which is so unfortunate.
Or then going to the other extreme. Oh, they're blind. Maybe they can help with this hearing project, making assumptions, right? I'm sure I've been guilty of something like that in my past. But I think more and more people are making an effort to do something and be more equitable. But yes, you've really been through it.
Yeah, it's a matter of really keeping it in perspective. And, when something doesn't work out right, it's important to step back and look at it. What's the problem? What can I do to make it better next time? And so often we don't take time to analyze what we do right and wrong in the course of any given day. Oh, we don't have time for that. Well, there's always time. It's a matter of priority.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Just taking a few minutes at the end of every day or a few minutes in the morning, right?
Or both.
Just digest, reflect, and be responsible for what we did.
It all gets back to meditation and slowing down and listening to what there is to be offered. We just don't do that nearly as much as we ought to.
What kind of meditation do you like to do, Michael?
Well, I've learned transcendental meditation, and I do that some. And sometimes I just slow down and stop at the end of the day. And I look inward and don't try to make any decisions. Don't try to think about anything specific. But as thoughts come up, I'll look at them, especially if it's about what went on during the day and what can I learn from it. I've learned over the years that one of the worst things that I used to say until literally fairly recently is I'm my own worst critic. I always listen to speeches when I travel and speak and talk about September 11th or trust and teamwork or the human-animal bond or whatever. And I've been traveling and doing this for almost 22 years now, since September 11th.
Yes.
I always record my speeches and I go back and listen to them. And I've said to people, I do it because I'm my own worst critic. And if I can decide something from that, then that's great. What I've learned is wrong thing to say. I'm my own best teacher, because the reality is I'm the only one that can really teach me. Teachers can offer information, but I need to be the one to teach me and learn it. And so I've learned that the more positive approach is the right one. I'm my own best teacher. And so I like to look at what goes on in the course of the day and look at it from the standpoint of a teaching experience. I do agree there's no such thing as failure. It's all about being learning experiences.
It absolutely is. And I love that you asked that question. So you're not saying, well, what did I do wrong today? Or what was bad about that? You're saying, oh, what could I learn from this?
Yeah.
Right. That's what I would call a quality question. Yes.
What didn't work right from my perspective? And did it really not work right? Or is it me? And if it didn't work right, what do I do next time I could end up in that same situation? And I think those are fair questions. And we can only really confront it for ourselves.
Yes. I think that's great. So you're making me think of sort of like this. Sometimes I have clients do kind of this biofeedback program, the Tessa way. So it's not scientific at all. But it is that personal reflection method where you're really, you need to know what you're listening for, what you're looking for, right, in order to actually give yourself a valuable critique.
Yeah.
And not being picky-uni, perfectionistic, that sort of thing, but actually like looking at, well, what's really important here? And how might I do this better? Oh, okay. gee, I just got like 3 ideas there. That's kind of cool. I'm going to try one out.
And it may be that you might not know upfront what you're looking for, but at least you ask the question, what am I looking for? What should I learn from this? And that will come.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
It always will come if we take the time to listen. Well, as you've learned and grown, what have you learned about faith?
Faith, there's a big question, right?
Is.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm kind of thinking back to that time where I almost drowned. And I think the thing that was so hard about it was this idea that I was just going to die and that would just be it. And there would be nothing else except terror. Somehow there was going to be this terror involved. Yeah. And I have come to learn that there's so much more to life and there's so much more to us, that was just a child's way to process what was happening, because my brain wasn't developed enough. And so now, thankfully, my brain's much more developed. And I have the ability to receive information and to know things without necessarily scientific facts. And I know that I know them because I know it. And it's in me, right? And also, I think there was a turning point for me in my consciousness around the idea that the universe is actually my friend. Yeah. And it's a loving, kind universe, right? And if anybody tells you anything different, like, you don't have to choose to believe that just because they do.
Yeah.
So when we create, right, we just create the world we want to live in, and then we connect in with that energy, because the energy is free and it's everywhere. Yep. It's available. Yes.
And if they choose not to believe that the universe is a kind universe, we can't force them to change. All we can do is say things like, and how's your world really going for you?
Exactly.
And think about that. And maybe they will, and maybe they won't, but at least you plant the seed and you see where it goes from there.
Yes. Plant the seed and be a role model.
Yes. Always be a role model.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with being a role model as far as I'm concerned.
No, and I think the more conscious we are about the role model, the roles that we play, the greater impact we can have.
Yeah.
And just, you know, a moment with somebody in an elevator, a moment just passing somebody on the sidewalk can change someone's life.
What's one thing you'd like people to know who are listening to us? There's a deep question.
Yes. I'd like them to know that even if you feel alone at times, you're actually not. And so it's okay to feel that way, but it's just a feeling. It's not the absolute truth. And so allow yourself to just explore, oh, what would it be like if I wasn't alone in this? Like, what if the universe is my friend? What if, like, the trees are my friend? Well, you can just choose whatever you want to. You know, the air is my friend. What if I'm not really alone? I'm just feeling alone. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Well, and what might I need next? You know, maybe I do want to call a friend, or maybe I do want to call somebody I haven't thought of in a long time, or just go out and talk to another soul.
Yeah.
Right.
It makes perfect sense to do that. Have you written any books or anything?
I have not written any books.
Oh my goodness, there's a job for you.
I have written course material. I have so much course material. It's not even funny, but that's where most of my writing has gone into, like, instructional trainings and things of that nature.
Do you have online courses available?
I will have some. I'm in a transition right now. I'm shifting my brand to say yes to your soul. And so I'm creating materials for that right now, and those will be available soon. And in the meantime, I do have free gifts. So if somebody wants to go, if there's an entrepreneur out there who wants a little support on a few topics, I've got some videos. I've got an audio right now available to anybody who wants it, to help you connect with your soul truth. Right.
So
it's just like a guided experience. Yeah.
And so how can people reach out to you? How can they get those and learn more about you and maybe contact you to get some help?
Yes, they can go to Tessa, TESSA, freegift.com, tessafreegift.com. And there's a sign up page, and they can sign up and they'll get a modest amount of emails from me. And I don't share information. I definitely want to respect that. And as soon as you receive an email from me, that's my email. If you want to reach out from there, you can.
Well, there you go. tessafreegift.com.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm also on, I am on social, of course. You can follow
LinkedIn
me on Facebook. My name, Tessa Alburn,
ALBURN, right?
Yep. And I'm on Insta. It's Realize Soul with Tessa. And I'm on LinkedIn. Like, I'm the only Tessa Alburn, which is kind of cool. So if you plug me in, you're going to find me.
I have discovered there is more than one Michael Hingson in the world, but I've never run into them, but I know they're out there. So
that's great.
It's one of the things. Well, I want to thank you for being with us. I really greatly appreciate your time, and I know you've got things to go do. I would love it when you get course material or you get links to all that, if you would pass it on, because we'll make sure it gets in the show notes. It's going to be a couple of months or 3 months before this goes up. And I don't know
I'll have something for you.
Oh, well, then get it to us by all means when this goes up.
Fantastic.
And the other thing is, if you need this to go up sooner because you want to promote the course stuff when they come out, let me know, but we'll help.
Oh, that's so thoughtful. Thank you. I appreciate
glad to help any way that we can. And I hope that people will reach out to you. Tessa Free Gifts, S or just gift?
Singular.
tessafreegift.com, and that they will reach out to you. And I hope that y'all will reach out to me. I'd love to hear what you think about the episode that we're just finishing. And also, of course, we would appreciate it if you give us a 5-star rating. And we value that very highly. Let us know with reviews, but those 5-star ratings we love. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'm easy to find. It's Michael H.I. at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. So please reach out. Tessa, for you and for anyone listening, if you know anyone who you think we ought to have as a guest on this Unstoppable Mindset podcast series, please let us know. We're always looking for more people to meet and to get to know, because I love to learn and I love to share. So please, if you know anyone, let us know. But Tessa,
I would be delighted to.
Oh, Michael, please. And I want to thank you one last time for being here with us and for giving us your time. So thank you very much for all that you've been able to bring to us today. And we look forward to you being on again and hearing about more of your adventures.
Thank you, Michael. It's really been a pleasure.